everyone, it's Nicole here for Simon Says Stamp with a tri-fold one-layer card featuring components from the September 2018 Sea Treasure Simon Says Stamp card kit. This kit comes with an awesome 6x8 stamp set that features all these cute mermaids and all the adorable little images you see here. And I just absolutely love it. So here is a look at the stamp set, the inks, the clear embossing ink, embossing powder, and sequins, plus envelope, all from the kit that I'm going to use here today. Plus I've trimmed down some Bristol Smooth cardstock to 5.5 by 12 inches. And I went ahead and drew in a really light pencil line at 4 inches and then 8 inches so that I would know where those score lines are going to go. I like to score last, but I still need to know where the seam's going to be because I don't want that crease going through one of the mermaid's faces or something like that. Plus it helps give me an idea where to center sentiments, like the sentiment I'm going to use on the first panel. I like to lay out the images I'm going to use. You can see that I am going to be using a lot of images from the Beautiful Mermaids stamp set included in the kit here today. I'm going to use all 3 mermaids, fish, turtles, the treasure chest, seaweed, coral, all of these things. I wanted it to be really, really full. I'm using Bristol Smooth cardstock because I find to create a one-layer card, this works really well for me. For one thing, I'm using Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers, and they are not going to bleed through the paper like an alcohol ink marker, so the back of my card is going to remain nice, crisp white. This is really important to me when doing a one-layer card so that the back doesn't look messy and I don't have to mount it on another piece of paper. I also like to keep it one layer because it's already folded into thirds. If you add a lot of layers, it can be a little tricky to get it to fit in a standard envelope really well. And then I'm using the Simon Says Stamp masking paper, and I'm masking everything. The most time-consuming part of this entire card is probably creating all the masks. You could forego some of the masking. I don't really know a better way around it if you're going to do what I did here, where I've kind of, stamped the treasure chest and then I masked it and stamped some seaweed behind it and things like that. But you could forego some of the masking if you wanted to color around the images rather than stenciling or inking over them like I'm going to do here today. It really just kind of depends on the look that you're going for. I went ahead and did the masking because I think it is the best way to get a really fantastic scene for what I want to do here. I'm going to be using some stencils over this and just to get that underwater type of look with all the inking. I'm going to continue to build the scene. I did start with the left panel, which is going to be the first panel you see in the trifold. I tried to have a mermaid on each panel of the card to keep the card nice and balanced. So it kind of goes in a visual triangle from the bottom lower corner up to the top and then again down to the bottom right corner. Just different mermaids in each little trifold or each little area, and then I want to fill in with accessories. So we've got the treasure chest in the first one and lots of seaweed and coral and things, and part of that I want to overlap the seam. Then we also have fish floating around, a couple of turtles in that last quadrant, or not quadrant, that last panel. So just kind of be aware visually of how you're building this. The Waves and Hills stencil is going to help me kind of create a sandy bottom along the bottom edge of the card. I did this with some antique linen Distress Oxide ink. Included in the September kit is some Tumbled Glass and Stormy Sky Distress Oxide inks. Starting with our Tumbled Glass Distress Oxide ink, we're going to add this all over the upper part of the panel. Even if a little of the tumbled glass gets down into the antique linen, we can always go back and add a little bit more to the border, and you'll see me do that later on. You also want to keep your work surface clean. So I just cleaned it up kind of partway through inking, because as I was shifting the paper, I was really afraid some of that ink might transfer from my work surface to the back of the card, and I really want to keep my work surface super clean. Now I should have erased those lines before I started inking, especially with the Distress Oxide. I did not. They will be fairly disguised once I add my score lines and the rest of my inking, but please be aware, before you start inking, erase your pencil lines if you make them. Now they're going to get hidden pretty good, because once I have the tumbled glass applied, and I also wanted to mention, I kind of did more of a pouncing motion over a lot of the background because I didn't want to pull up any of my stencils or masks, not stencils, my masks. Now I'm definitely doing a pouncing design through the Simon Says Stamp Waves stencil, and I'm just kind of moving it all the way across to help smooth out and disguise where I've pieced that together. I'm then going to take my tumbled glass distress inking tool, and I'm going to just kind of go over some of those areas and blend out to smooth it, and then spritz this with water from a distress sprayer once I'm done. This is a good time before we do any water technique or anything like that. If we need to fix any of the bottom border, you can go ahead and do that. You can always add it later as well. I'm going to start removing masks now. Because I spritzed this with water, I blotted it dry immediately, but we don't want water to seep through the mask. And so a pair of tweezers comes in super handy. You can see here, and I'm simply pulling all of these masks off, leaving the awesome stamped designs below. Where I stenciled along the bottom edge, you can just take the antique linen ink blending tool and work that over the bottom of the design, which is what I'm going to do really quick. It's really easy to color over distress ink or distress oxide ink with your zig markers, so you don't have to worry about that at all. This is also a good time to make sure your work surface is completely clean before you start coloring, so you don't get any of those smudges on the back of your trifold card. One of my favorite things about trifold cards is I'm a huge scene card fan, and this is a great way to extend your scene if the standard A2 size format is not big enough for you. So in this case, I had a lot more images that I wanted to use than what I had room for. So a trifold card just makes it a nice long underwater scene, which is one of my favorites to create. I am using the Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. I have listed these across the bottom of the screen so that while I'm coloring at any time, you know exactly which colors I'm using for what areas. Light green and yellow green for my seaweed. The coral is some carmine red. I did not cut out that mask because I thought it would take too long, so all I did was simply color over anything that got inked, and you can see that I still ended up with a great result, and it colored over that blue ink perfectly. Anytime you're working, you can also kind of fix some of that bottom border if you want to. Coloring in with beige and mid-brown now for the rocks along the bottom to give those a little bit more definition. I did really try to color everything that maybe was, for example, the seaweed all at once. Then I did the coral, and then I did the rocks. From here, I decided to work at kind of one panel at a time, meaning we're going to color this first mermaid, and anything else on this first panel will even add the stamping for the sentiment on the first panel and emboss that and everything, and then move on to the second panel and the third. I'm going to color in her skin, and then we're going to add some color to her mermaid tail with turquoise green and green shadow. I did different colors for all the mermaids, and I decided to go pretty wild and bright. What a great opportunity, really, to do some fun things with color with these mermaids. You definitely don't have to do traditional hair colors or anything like that, which I always think is fun. And I wanted this to be really bright and colorful. For her hair, I'm using blue and English lavender. I love this color combination, and I think it makes really fantastic mermaid hair. Very, very fun. I like to lay down my dark color and then blend out with the lighter color. You will also notice that I was really afraid of kind of pulling in water with my zigs for this project because I didn't want it to bleed outside of the lines and maybe mess anything up. So I am doing all my coloring with the markers. They blend beautifully on the Bristol Smooth cardstock, and I really don't need the addition of water here at all. You can go back over certain areas if they need more color or more blending, whatever you want to do there. Her top and the shell in her hair is peach pink and sugared almond pink. Then we're going to move on to the fish, which I'm using Persian blue, light blue, yellow, and bright yellow. All of the fish that are this style are going to be colored in this color combination. I am using a ton of markers here, so I thought it would be easiest to replicate anything when I could. So for the fish, that made it really easy. And then the last fish up here, we're going to do in some reds, and then we've got the cute little treasure chest as well. So this is going to be carmine red, light carmine, and sugared almond pink. And then some grays for the treasure chest. And I used something a little different. I used blue gray and pale gray. I don't use blue gray all that often, but I like the color this adds. It definitely has that blue undertone, which works really great. And then we'll use the gray color for the rest of the chest to kind of along the edges, the hardware, things like that. Inside the chest, I wanted the colors to be bright, so kind of like the little shell necklace or whatever that's hanging out, peach pink, and then bright yellow and yellow for the rest of the gold or whatever you want it to be that's inside of the chest. That really finishes up the coloring for the first panel of the card. While I was finishing that, I decided to go ahead and stamp my sentiment, which I am stamping one of them from that beautiful Mermaids stamp set with the clear embossing ink included in the kit, sprinkling on white embossing powder and then heat setting that. In order to keep my card from warping, I want to make sure my heat tool is really good and warm before I take it to my paper. In addition, I want to add bubbles. I went ahead and did not stamp these first because the VersaFine ink is a pigment ink and it will tend to kind of smudge and smear. So I like to save anything like bubbles till later because I'm just going to be adding some glossy accents on top of those to give them a little definition. I'm also using a Versa marker to add some detail to the mermaid tail and the mermaid fin. Then I'm going to take the awesome new Simon Says Stamp Mermaid Ultra Fine Embossing Powder included in the kit and sprinkle that on where I have drawn on the detail for her mermaid tail. All three mermaids are going to have this detail to them, and it has some awesome iridescent bluish sparkle to them, which I think looks great. Finally, a black glaze pen for things like eyes. I did go over the eyes on the mermaid with the black glaze pen, and I'm going to let this completely dry before I take my white opaque pen and add the highlights back into her eyes. And that just takes a second to dry all the way. Let's move on to the second panel, we're going to color in her hair with bright yellow and yellow. And this is going to be some super bright hair, but I think that it really complements the purplish pink mermaid tail and her blue top perfectly. And it really adds a fun, colorful look. I just tried to balance out the colors throughout the card design while still keeping them really bright and fresh. I went over her hair a couple times because I just kept feeling like it wasn't exactly the way I wanted it to look, which you can do very easily on the Bristol Smooth cardstock with the Zig markers. Let's go ahead and get her skin colored in because that does help a lot. At first I thought, oh no, what have I done? Have I ruined my card? Because I kind of wasn't totally on board with the hair. I should have done the skin first, and I think that I would have liked it better. Then with the purple pink mermaid tail, it really balances out nice. Again, I felt like it blended a little too much, so I'm going to take that light violet marker and go back over certain areas before blending that out with my pink. Color in her blue top. The starfish and the clamshell in her hair are some reds and some blues, and then the shell she's holding in her hand will color with brown and light brown. This is a nice neutral that will help balance out all the bright colors going on. Here's that white pen adding the highlights back into the eyes. We'll go ahead and add the black pen to the second mermaid as well, and while that dries, we will add some bubbles throughout the card. I'm going to go ahead and fill out the rest of the card anywhere that I think I want bubbles. Take my Versa marker, draw those lines in with the bullet tip of that pen, sprinkle on the Mermaid ultrafine embossing powder, and then we will heat set that for the second mermaid as well. Now, if any embossing powder gets where you don't want it, I like to take a paintbrush and just wipe that away, remove that before I heat set it so I don't have any funny little mermaid flakes where I don't want them. The scene is starting to come to life. We've got just a few small images left and that last mermaid. And I also really love the look, especially with mermaids, to take a white opaque pen and draw in some detail in their hair with little dots. I think it adds to the overall look. So all of my mermaids are going to have some little detail in their hair that was created with this white opaque pen. My last mermaid is going to have some pink hair, and this is some bright pink hair with peach pink and sugared almond pink. Pink had been not used a lot yet in the card, and so I thought it would help balance everything really nicely. We hadn't used it since the first mermaid's top and the clamshell in her hair, so this is a nice kind of visual triangle again. Where I felt like the hair blended out too much, I'm just going to go back in and blend out with my lighter marker. Let's get her skin. And then I went ahead and did all the rest of her coloring off camera. Cobalt blue and light blue for her tail, blue and English lavender for her top. And then the turtles are all green, pale green, turquoise green, and green shadow. I went with brighter green colors for these turtles to match the bright colors of the mermaids. Love how these little turtles turned out. So, so cute. And again, some little white dots throughout. You can see that I did the hair on the other two mermaids off camera. We want to, again, add sparkle to that last mermaid tail so it's very consistent throughout the entire card design. Taking my paintbrush and just removing some of those unwanted flakes from where they might have migrated before heat setting this. Also, I did color in the rest of the fish, same colors that I used from that first panel. We've got the little shell along the bottom edge now that we're going to color in with some purples and pinks, a little haze blue for the pearl itself. And then we can add some of the finishing details to this card. I did end up adding another sentiment that's curved along the edge of the card that says, "Hello, gorgeous." Now, I thought I would use water for the pearl in the shell, and that was a huge mistake because I ended up transferring water all over my card. I managed to kind of fix it with some markers and things. But if you have that happen, I was so close to the end of the card. I obviously didn't want to redo the whole thing, so I just left it and just tried to fix it with my coloring. I've scored my card with a score pal now at 4 1/8 inches, and I'm using a Teflon bone folder to make sure that the creases are nice. And there you can see the card, how easy it folds. Let's add some detail to the sand along the bottom of the ocean scene with the Stardust glitter pen and the white opaque pen. Helps really add some nice detail to this and finishes off the design really nicely. Finishing details are all we have left now. So a few small little things. I want to take some glossy accents and place that over bubbles and also the pearl. And we want that to dry completely. And then we want to add some sparkle. This is a great time to take the new treasure chest sequins, all these awesome gold sequins from the kit, and scatter them throughout. They add kind of the look of more bubbles, they add some sparkle to the card, and just a nice little embellishment without being thick. Your card is still going to be relatively nice and flat, it's still going to fit in your envelope great, but it adds some fun embellishment. And I'm going to add these throughout my card using some Ranger Multi-Matte Medium to attach them, and the jewel picker makes picking these up and placing them on the card without getting fingers in the way so easy. Once I have all of these in place, I decided to make my envelope match, and I'm going to stamp one of the mermaids from the Beautiful Mermaid stamp set on this awesome metallic lavender envelope, also from the kit. We're going to use the clear embossing ink from the kit, stamp that mermaid kind of in the bottom left corner on the front of the envelope, and sprinkle on white embossing powder and heat set that. Again, with the envelopes, I do not like my envelopes to warp. Make sure your heat tool is really nice and hot before you take it to the envelope itself so that it melts the powder right away, and that really helps eliminate the warping. Once we have the front of our envelope completely heat set, I'm going to flip it over. I thought it would be really fun. I think it's cute when the back flap of a card features some fun little embellishment as well. So I picked the Mermaid Looks Good on You sentiment and stamped that on the back flap, again with the clear embossing ink, sprinkled on the white embossing powder, tap that off, and heat set this as well. And that is going to make a perfectly coordinated envelope to go with our one layer tri-fold Mermaids card. Here is a look at the finished card design, all folded up. And then when you open it, it creates this extended long mermaid scene, which is so super cute and fun. I love these tri-fold cards. I'll show you how easily this fits within an envelope. Tucks inside so nice. And then when you pull it out, you have your great little card. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this tri-fold card featuring components from the September 2018 Sea Treasure card kit from Simon Says Stamp. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.